to make accurate, data-driven decisions. Diane Buckley-Altwies is the CEO of Core Performance Concepts. She's a seasoned project management expert throughout multiple industries. She's an author, a speaker, volunteer, consultant. As always, we're very fortunate to be learning from you too. Are you ready to get started?
Yep.
I think so. You ready, Steve?
Yes. Take it away, Diane.
All right. Well, today we're gonna talk a lot of theory, but hopefully make it applicable to what we deal with every day in managing our projects. So, has everybody ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Oh yeah.
Right. It's probably the most common theory that's out there, and it talks about you have to fulfill the lowest level need before you can aspire for the next level. So if you don't have a roof over your head or you don't have food in your pantry, then how are you going to be your best self, right? So Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about what you need at a very minimum level to get to the point where we call self-actualization, which is where you have that self-esteem, you have a desire to do more in your life, and you're not worried about food or a roof over your head. So Maslow is kind of the godfather of all these motivational theories. And as we probably have said before, can you really motivate individuals? I mean, the reality is no, we really can't motivate people. People are motivated on their own. Now we can influence them, but we really can't motivate them. And what we're going to talk about a lot today is, think about all the people you've met or worked with, and, who were the people that really got their jobs done? Who were the people that didn't? And then you have to kind of think about, well, why? Why did they not? And it probably comes down to some of these core theories.
Really does. I think you're right. It's really difficult, to your point of wanting to be social and share with others if you don't have enough for yourself, right? In order to then move up this pyramid here. So,
another way to put it is you got to love yourself first, right? Before you can love others.
Exactly.
And it is very true. And I talk about, we're going to talk about a couple different theories, but it really is true that understanding, you as a project manager, understanding where each of your team members, your clients sit on this spectrum is important. Now, people can change, obviously. Somebody that doesn't have a house over their head and then all of a sudden does have a house, now their needs go to something else, like safety. Like, okay, am I in a safe neighborhood? I might have a house, but I'm not in a very safe neighborhood. So now I want to kind of strive to do more. So there's a lot of different things that we can look at. And Maslow's is the one that everybody always gravitates to. But once you're up a little bit higher in that level of the Maslow theory, and you're working with people that you're trying to motivate, which you can't. So you're trying to influence them to be motivated. Herzberg came through with this theory of dissatisfiers and satisfiers. And the interesting thing here is generally pay is not a satisfier, it's a dissatisfier. So if you're making good money, it's not necessarily motivating you to do more. But if you're not making enough, it can make you miserable, right? So and we've had like conversations about, you talk about equality in pay, and when it's known that people are getting a much higher level of pay for the same job and you're maybe not, that's a dissatisfier and a disincentive for people.
Yeah, and the flip of that, if you're the one making more, you're not really edging yourself to do a significant amount more because, hey, this is what I make to do this job, kind of thing.
Right, and I always can relate to this one here on the satisfier side, because I'm one of those individuals that I need that challenging work. If I'm bored, I'm not happy, right? And none of these are wrong. I was having a conversation with my husband the other day too. It's like, none of these are wrong. It's just recognizing where people are and come to where they are. And if you think about roles that people play, you ever have somebody on your team that was in a role that just turned out that the role was just bad for them?
Oh, sure.
Maybe there's some people on this call too that wanted to be, maybe they wanted to be a project manager at one point in time, tried it and said, "Ooh, can't do that. I'll stay as a business analyst." I know people like that because it's not what makes them happy.
Right. Well, I think we've all seen that situation in our work lives, whether it's happened to you or not, or people around you, it's definitely something we've seen.
Right. And finding and understanding where people are and finding that sweet spot for them to participate in is critical. McClellan is another theory where it just talks about one of three areas that people generally are motivated. They're either motivated for achievement, they're either motivated for power, or they're motivated to be part of a group. And you can think about people within your organization that, or even in sports, you think about what are they motivated for? Are they a really well a successful athlete?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think they're motivated for? It's probably achievement.
Well, yeah, right. Well, let's just talk about ourselves. I'm definitely achievement, and I'm an athlete, ironically.
There you go.
Or I should say former athlete. Whatever. Still do it, but yeah. Achievement for me is definitely Steve. One. But what about you guys?
I'm achievement as well. Yeah, I will say that I am as far as that's concerned. Diane, how about you?
I'm going to guess Diane's achievement. That's my guess.
It might be actually a little bit more of affiliation than it is achievement. I've never been like that very targeted person on, I'm going to do everything I can to get to the top of the mountain. Mm-hmm. I'm one where it's like, okay, how do we all get to the top of the mountain?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So
you still have some level of achievement because you mentioned about personal growth in there a minute ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or just challenging work.
Yeah. And you're not all one thing. Mm-hmm. Just like anything, these are just generalizations. So someone isn't entirely one and not any of the other.
Oh, correct.
Yeah.
And
the
who's
iron fist of power. Yeah.
Well, I can't be I just want to achieve and I have to care nothing about any affiliation whatsoever. So it's just really what are you most?
Yeah.
If
you stay on the concept on the whole athlete thing, and again, I'm a hockey fan, right? So we're just getting now to the end where we're getting to the playoffs.
Yeah.
These guys are it is all about getting that Stanley Cup.
Yep.
Yeah. But they have affiliation needs to do it together.
They have to do it together. Exactly.
Yep. Yeah.
Exactly. So again, all these theories, intertwine with each other, but understanding that there are these different ones out there. The next ones we're going to talk about is X, Y, and Z. This was more under the realm of management theories of how to get people to do the work. And theory X basically says people dislike work, so you have to tell them exactly what to do. And that kind of came out of the Industrial Revolution when we started getting manufacturing and things like that. How do you be most productive? Well, people don't like to do the work, so you just have to tell them what to do, and they can be productive. Theory Y is on the other end of the coin, where workers enjoy work, and they want to participate in making decisions. So you can see two ends of the spectrum here, where maybe it depends on the industry you're in that you need certain type of people, and even the theory X people, it's not a bad thing. Their motivation is, I go into work, I do my job, I make my paycheck, and I'm fine with people telling me how to go, that direction. Think of a manufacturing production line. If everybody wanted to be, decision maker, you may not get anything done in that production line.
Or very little. Yeah, definitely. Or support. I think that was another one we had discussed previously, a support role where you need to support, you need to get these things through because, your customers need your help to make that happen. Yeah.
And just because it says dislike work, we don't take that personally, but it's just they're going to do their task and they're done. And, sometimes I wish I could separate my world from work once in a while. Right? Sometimes we take too much of it home with us and deal with it all day long, when sometimes it would be nice just to go in the office, do my job, and go home.
Yeah. Does that mean you're a wire as far as that's concerned, Diane?
Am I a
Yeah.
liar?
A wire. You're an X or a
Y,
Y
a
here.
Y,
You're
a
a
Y.
A
Y.
liar.
Yeah.
I thought she said liar.
No.
I'm like, what did I say wrong?
No, not at all.
Nice, very
Well, I
good.
mean,
know
I think I
Steve
don't
enjoys work.
well, I'm definitely a Y probably on this one, but we do take, input from customers and whatnot. So again, it's not like you're all one or the other,
Oh,
but we all know, I mean, I've worked with people that do prefer, like, they would prefer to do a job that's more systematic. So I would
Mhm.
think Y X is better for systematic type of jobs where it's predictable. They know what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day after that, and so on and so forth. And then the Y is maybe for the people that do more creative
Yeah.
or
Or
demanding engineering work, things like that.
yeah, or like I said, you can evolve. You might start
Sure.
off and maybe you get your entry level job and you're doing that tactical,
Mhm.
systematic kind of work, and you say,
Yeah.
you know what, I want to do something more, and then get more involved, get more exposure. And like I said, with the example of a friend of mine that did want to be a PM, he's an awesome business analyst, wanted to be a PM then he went and tried it, and he says, you know what, not for me.
Yeah.
And
Well, I would
that's
think
it.
that PMs are more in the Y category than the X.
Yeah, because you have to be able to make decisions.
Right.
It's not, and I can't be going to my superiors and asking for them to make the decision on everything.
No,
That's
that's not going to work.
we,
no.
we've even seen a few PMs in the audience say that identify as Y as we've been going along as well.
Yeah.
So I think that you're spot on there, Steve.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Awesome. And then there's Z, which is kind of that next evolution of management theory, where the theory is that people should be trustworthy, right? I'm not a liar, right?
Yeah, no,
No, you're a wire.
I'm gonna
You're a
go
Y.
on the
liar.
record. You are a YER as opposed to yeah.
But in general, people are trustworthy, and they shouldn't need close supervision, and if you think back in the old industrial age, that's what happened, because we had all these machines, and it's like, you had to have very close supervision, but as the world evolves, and the opportunities change, then the way people work will change. And in this particular case, it assumes that people are trustworthy and they don't need much supervision. And that's what leads into the whole, high performing teams. So you could still have people that are more that, X personality, that X kind of uh, role within a team, and you could still be functioning very well because everybody's in the right place. You
Right.
trust people to do their job in the best way they can. And some jobs require more direction or documentation and processes. I mean, if you had, Steve, if you had your developers develop code totally different every single, without any standards, that would not be a good thing. But you want
That's
them
right.
to also be creative in
Yeah, I mean,
solving
I would
problems.
say our team is more on the Y spectrum for sure, almost
Yeah.
all positions even, um, but you definitely, I mean, I agree with you with the whole trust, because without having the team just know what they're supposed to do and they're going to do it, you're going to spend way too much of your time, micromanaging something you shouldn't have to do. So,
Right. And then again, it's all about understanding, we're talking about this in the terms of motivating people,
mhm.
and it's not like I can tell somebody that you need to make decisions, right?
Well, I think we have to know, right? What you're saying is we as project managers need to recognize, okay, this person doesn't really like making decisions, so let's make sure they're doing the right tasks for this project if they have to be part of your team.
Or ask why they don't like making decisions, and
Sure.
maybe there's some things that you can do to help move them in a different role. But don't throw a person into a role that has fear about making decisions, and don't throw a person into a role that doesn't like that systematic kind of environment. Don't put them in a role because they're not going to be happy.
Yeah. and I might be getting ahead of ourselves, but how do you do this if you have a brand new team that you're just starting out with?
Well, I think there's always kinds of team. I'm
Like a
lost the word.
survey?
Well, surveys or just teamwork exercises and
Mhm.
stuff you can do. Get to know people. I mean, we've had conversations about like what happens in a virtual environment, and you're building a team.
Yeah.
You want to be able to talk to them. Don't just. You got to make it somewhat personal, and it's really hard nowadays when everybody's working so virtually. But even the three of us over the years, we're way more productive than we were when we first started doing these webinars, right? But it takes time, and we don't have the luxury of being in the same location for each of these. But we're doing the best we can, and we're building relationships, with each other and with the audience. Because we're here and we're sharing information. So it's having those team exercises, those team building exercises is really important, and the project manager has to be willing to get to know people
Yeah.
that they're working with, especially if it's new.
Yeah, and also I'm gonna just on the same vein there, like if you put someone in the wrong spot, be open to moving people around. So
Yep,
as needed.
exactly. I'll use my friend.
It's all common sense, but
he was perfectly happy going back into be business analyst. He just realized that that's not his thing, and and he's awesome.
Yeah.
And the last one we'll talk about here is Vroom and Porter Lawler expectancy theory. So this one is more about people needing rewards and feeling the reward is enough to change their behavior. Like, what is the task they're trying to do, and what is that reward, and whether or not that's going to move the needle, and be motivated to do the effort for that reward. I'll give you one that does not work with Diane. Well, it's like this is just me, right? It's like we and there's one event that happened. They're having like a contest, and we were going to get like some generic swag for that contest. I'm like, that's a lot of work for just like a t-shirt. I'm like, no, not interested. Now,
that stuff doesn't work for me either.
But if it was like a trip or something like that, or really special swag that nobody else has that's worth something, okay, then maybe I'll think about it.
I'm right there with you, Diane. I feel like I've passed up swag many times if the effort is not there. The carrot's not worth it. But I've died for sales competitions in the past for like custom shoes that one person in your entire organization has. And Steve's laughing because it's silly, but it's still one and the same, right? Yeah. It's kind of that same idea of it's apparel, but the way to get it's a little the carrot.
So it's like carrot or stick kind of attitude, but the carrot has to be commensurate with the effort that's gonna move that needle. So yes, you can get people motivated, but what motivates Matt and motivates me, I may not care about a pair of shoes.
For me, I just like to see it. If I'm going to get something done, I like when you're done with it, you're like, wow, I made that. That's the reward. You don't need a t-shirt.
But there are individuals, and I don't think we talked about this yet. Like salespeople are a perfect example. Really good salespeople are a perfect example of very reward
commissions,
achievement based.
Right.
Sure. That's what makes them feel proud. That's that self-actualization of the Maslow pyramid. When you can achieve those things that you really want to achieve. Great salespeople have those vision boards and things like that, and it's like that's not something that motivates me. But everybody's different, and you got to understand your team.
Yeah, that's maybe we can we're asking the audience for questions, but what do they find motivate some of their team members? What techniques do you guys use out in the field to motivate your team?
Yeah. That's a great one.
Or to help influence motivation, I should be very
clear.
And
then again, we just kind of summarized here. Yeah, we just summarized here on the different theories that we've talked about. And the reality is everybody is different. And we've said this before, everybody is different. And you can't treat everybody like a cookie cutter and do the same thing for everybody. And it really comes down to what's the importance of where you're going, and what are those motivators that exist that you can leverage to achieve the goals of the organization or of the project. And then that goes into the whole concept of, why are we doing this project? And we talk about motivation and getting people ready for change. So now you kind of understand who they are, right? So now what we want to do is kind of like get them on board with change. Like, this project is going to change. We've got a new senior leadership team that just acquired your business, or we've got a new product that's being launched and we really want the salespeople selling it. If you've ever gotten a chance to see Simon Sinek, and he does a ton of these TED Talks and written several books and everything else, including this particular one, Start With Why. But I've given you the link for the YouTube. And when I saw this, oh my gosh, it probably was 10 years ago. It just like totally hit me, especially if you've ever worked in sales, or if you've ever had somebody pitch you from a sales perspective. That's probably more the issue, where I start rolling my eyes, because they start with, hey, we do this, and it works this way, and this is how great we are, and this is what we do. And the person on the other side is saying, like, why do I care? Mm-hmm. So what Simon says here in his talk here is, you have to start with the why. And we talk about this too in our charter. What's the business problem? What are we trying to solve? Why is that a problem? Why do we want to solve it? Yeah. And if you start with that, people can relate to that. And I know, Steve, with Project Insight, Project Insight is a software product. It's what it is. But you're focused solely on helping the project managers succeed.
Yeah, unify your data, automate your work, make your life easier, make your work life easier for the project manager. We've talked about that a tool like Project Insight is almost like a self-driving car for project managers, because we take away some burdens that you'd have to do manually. And we've been doing that ever since the beginning, right? And that's what computer software generally is anyway. It's helping do things more efficiently, right? So get things done quicker, make it easier. But it's not as, we've talked about this before from a vision statement, like that's a great vision statement for what we do, because we're a technical product for professional project managers. But like sometimes the why is, hey, we want to cure cancer. That's an easy why to explain to people. And I think some of us do projects where it is more difficult to say why, we're building a bridge. Why are we building the bridge? Well, to ease traffic. That's a little bit easier. But I think some of us do things in technology where the why is not as easy to see.
But the challenge is if you can get to the why, people will rally around a why much more than they rally around a what or a how.
No, right. And I'm just saying if it might be more challenging to get to that why.
To actually
it's important to do it, because you might just say, oh, that's too hard, I can't figure it out, let's just do it.
Yeah. Why do we want to go to Mars?
It's to be multi-planetary species, if you believe in that. So that's right. There you go.
But please, everybody should watch that video regardless. I think it's just one of the best ones that's out there. And it makes you think more about talking from a why perspective and versus that how and that what. And if you are in the sales role, or if you're talking to clients and all of a sudden you start catching yourself doing the what and the how. I mean, there's a lot of times I talk about the why, like, why do you want it to work that way? Right? Just a question like, why is this important to you? Get them to explain to you what, why they need it in a certain way. I had a conversation just the other day. It's like, you're focusing in on a very small percentage, and unless I understand why that small percentage is like that important, I can't get behind it, because I think you're just being very trivial. So tell me more about the why.
And maybe
why
you can get, sometimes you might get that from your sponsor.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then once we understand, who we're working with, and again, all those motivational theories applies to your team, applies to your senior managers, it also applies to your customers. Now you have to think about where my organization is in its maturity, because again, we're trying to affect change in this series that we've been providing to you guys. And what maturity level your organization is will also drive how you approach change. So, you can't just wake up in the morning and say, we're changing, and everybody's going to, understand what I want them to do and just go do it. And that's the optimizing. That's the one where, the leaders and staff, have very strategic, direction. They have that trust within their organization that people will execute on that strategy and know how to get it done. But most organizations aren't at that level. If you're in a startup organization, you're probably more along this baseline where you've got your founder, and it's just more of a traditional management style where it's like, I have my vision. This is probably you, Steve, 15 years ago, right? I have my vision and I need these things done. But as you started building your team and your team started getting more involved with your vision, then you can start setting up different kinds of metrics versus just get the software out, right? And now you're making things repeatable. You're handing things off, to individuals, whether they're ones that need to do the systemized tasks or ones that need to be the more creative tasks. So depending on where you are in that organization will depend how much change your organization can handle.
Yep, that's for sure.
And I always like looking at like the evolution, like when you get to managed, where it says executive and staff used balanced measures to make decisions. This is what we've been talking about with KPIs, right? Everybody's got their KPIs. Everybody's KPIs are rolling up to the top level. And if we're measuring the right things, then we'll make much better decisions. If we've got the right people in the right roles, we'll make better decisions. If we've got, so it's everything's intertwined, and we need to be able to have those measures as well as understanding the people that are doing that work and how do we get them to, deliver on those measures.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, we all, I know I was just talking to a friend of mine who works in a large real estate company, 150 years old, and they're for sure in the optimizing. They were referring to the fact that they buy their building materials 3 years in advance. Now it's stockpiled. I mean, that's a lot of, optimization. I would say most businesses are not, are more in the green and blue areas, and then even if you are optimized, I think you run the risk of actually missing opportunities by maybe you get too set in those ways too.
Yeah, no, when you said 150 years old, I was like, wow, there's probably inefficiencies just because they've been running that way for that long.
Well, I was referring to Irvine Company, so they've been around, yeah. And
yeah.
I was surprised to hear what he was saying, because we were just kind of talking about all stuff going on.
And you made a comment though, thinking that most companies were probably in that green and the blue, the define and manage, but in reality, what 80% of employers are small.
Yeah, we're smaller companies.
I was thinking that too. Yeah, it's that top approach down, right? Because it's so small and
well, it's probably spread more evenly than we think, just because there's a lot of small businesses out there that might be that, to your point, Matt, that might be more that top down.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want to get into that repeatable and defined, to where but if you notice, KPIs aren't part of like that lower end per se, except for we got to sell, right?
Yeah.
That's a startup. We got to sell. So the KPIs might be very simple, just a handful in those lower maturity models, and it gets more complicated as you go up the model, in tying all those KPIs and getting people aligned with those strategies.
Yeah, and I think that the red is really going to be more limited to smaller, very small companies. Like most, even any kind of people, if you have 20, 30 people in your company, you're not in the red anymore.
You hope
There's
not.
I don't think that works very well.
You're right. It probably does.
I mean, you're still going to have leadership. You may have one leader at the top, but you're going to have people that are doing for sure orange and green and probably green and blue to be running the business, unless you're changing it all around all the time. But I think that
and just moving from level to level is change into itself.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are a startup and you're striving to get to that next level, what are the things that have to change?
Yeah. And I think, you can get too much into, like, let's just talk historically, right? So Sears is like the Amazon of the 19th century, and I'm sure they were optimizing, but then they optimized so much that they got upended by, a completely new startup that is now Amazon.
Yeah, where's that Christmas Sears catalog?
Exactly. So, I mean, I think that even if you're a big company, you have to have a mindset of not, you can't just be sitting there forever and hope that things will just keep staying the way they are, especially now.
Change is inevitable.
Bezos has been on the record to say that the person that's going to topple us might be here in the marketplace right now, right? To Steve's point of that Sears to Amazon and Amazon to whatever comes next kind of thing, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, it's just, we're setting people up. I can't talk. For change, and helping them through that change is not, a simple task. And I think that's what we're trying to say here in this webinar is there's a lot of components. You need those KPIs that we've talked about in the prior two sessions. You need to understand the people. You need to understand where your organization is. And so it's not a simple task, and it can't be done in a silo.
Yeah. And a lot of times project managers are the agents of that, working for the executive team. So it's kind of as project managers, it's our responsibility to kind of take that on a little bit.
And it goes back to our why. It's like, I want to know why this is important.
Well, hopefully you as the PM knows why, and then you're able to convey that. But like, if you don't know why, you should go to your executives and find out why from them.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So we're talking about, complicating things, right? So let's just complicate it even more. So I love this little law of diffusion concept here, because we all know what standard deviation is, right? And, you got, most of the people are in the middle, but then you got the outliers, and when you're talking about change, you've got people that are the innovators, the ones that, hey, you know what? Let's go. I'm ready to go. I'll change, whatever sounds good. Let's do it. And then you've got the early adopters. And I think I've said it before. I'm one of those, sometimes an early adopter, but probably, I'm probably more in that early majority kind of thing. But if I'm running a project and I understand why, I'll be in that innovator, early adopter mode. And when I understand why. And then you've got the late majority, and then you got the laggards, that don't want to change. And so the point here is, if you have a project that you're responsible for change in your organization, focus on your innovators and your early adopters, period. Because once they're the ones that will roll up their sleeves, they'll do whatever it takes, they'll work the extra hours, they'll really kind of, put that extra effort in. And as things start solidifying, then all of a sudden the early majority start looking, it's like, what are you doing? I'll join in. And then you get the late majority. I'm joining. So now then the laggards have no choice but to join in at that point in time. So there's a whole concept of that tipping point. So if you get that 25% or 15 to 25%, adopting whatever you're changing, then you'll make it stick. But if you try to tackle everybody at the same time, you will fail in that effort for change. So again, in addition to understanding all of your, motivational theories and who's in your team, who are the ones that are really going to help drive this?
We get a lot of focus often as people are looking to implement our software, right? And sometimes people do focus exclusively on the laggards, right? Like, well, we do have some people that are still used to writing things down on paper, and that's how they do all of their work. And I think to your
And you're
point,
not going to rip that piece of paper out from under them.
You're not going to, exactly, right? There's somebody that still has a flip phone on their desk today, and that's the way that it is. So I think that it's really key to focus on, the early little snowball and keep it going, so that way you can get everybody involved, or the majority.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the laggards are going to come on only when they see everybody else does it. And so, like you said, rolling out a new tool, get your early adopters to help you. And then when that's successful, then it makes it a lot easier. And I think that that crossing the chasm, this also applies to like a startup in general, if you're building a new product. But it sounds like if you're doing a project that is just a change, even using that same technique in your own organization to get people excited with the people that are, like, for me, I'm an early adopter. It doesn't got to take much to get me to want to go and try it. So,
well, and if you think about it, how much energy do you have to expend if you focus on the laggards or even the late?
Right. Don't focus on them.
Yes.
Right. So why would you? Well, again, why would you? And you know what? Maybe you never do.
Right.
Maybe you never do, because could it be just as successful if you've captured 70% of the market?
For sure.
And not worried about the last 25, 30.
Well, you could waste a lot of your energy in the wrong areas if you do.
Correct. And that's really the point. So for prepping ourselves for change, you really need to understand who are those individuals, whether it's your clients, your executives, your people on your team, yourself, like, who are the ones that are like excited for this change? Those are the ones you need to have on board and working towards that goal. So I did love this particular video. So yeah, please download that video and take a look. It was really, it makes a lot of sense when you all of a sudden you say, oh my God, totally makes sense.
That's another Simon Sinek video, right, Diane?
I think so. I think so.
It is.
Yeah. But there's so many of them I was looking at, and I picked that one. I was like, I didn't get a chance to look at it again before the call today, but I think it is. So again, just to kind of, clarify, and these are concepts that, there's no particular order, but it's things you need to be thinking about if you are trying to affect change in your organization and motivating people for change. So, obviously, what are their motivations? Because we're not going to change their motivations. They may evolve, but they're not changing on their own. Who is your audience that you want to change, right? And then do we understand the why? Why are we making this change? And forget the how and everything else. It's just like, why, and make sure that everybody is 100% clear as to why the change is good, or why the change would be beneficial in the long run. And then what are your KPIs, and your organizational maturity? So if you're talking about, a small startup, and you have a bunch of people that are innovators, then change might be good, might be easy. If you're in just a small mom and pop shop that's been making tortillas and sandwiches for 55 years, maybe not. Maybe a change would be a significant thing to go to, all cashless transactions. It might be a huge change for them. And then figure out what that tipping point is. At what point in time, who do I need to get on board to ensure that this becomes a snowball and becomes something that actually can stick? Because I have seen times when, if you don't really get the effort to stick, it reverts back pretty quickly, and then you've spent all that time and energy on trying to make the change, and it just didn't work because you didn't focus on the right things and you didn't get people aligned before you started down that path.
Yeah, I think this is really important. This is probably another one of those hidden steps that people don't really, for some of these larger projects that make, like you said, make a big change, stepping back, taking the time to put this together is a good recommendation.
I see a lot where organizations are just so focused on charging forward that they end up spending time on things that, in my opinion, are kind of a waste of time. They end up churning a lot of time and energy on things that aren't necessarily going to have a big impact. And that's what, this whole series is about, is how do we, utilize KPIs? How do we, help move our organization forward and deliver on the projects that are strategic for the organizations we work for?
Now, would you put your change plan in your charter, or is this a separate document generally?
It's probably a separate document. Mm-hmm. Charter should be short and sweet. That's where the why is.
Yeah.
That's where the why is.
Mm-hmm.
And your stakeholders, and even part of your stakeholder analysis to identify, who are your innovators, who are your proponents, who are the people that are the naysayers, because those are also stakeholders. Our laggards are over there, but we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on them, but we need to know who they are.
So basically, you in your plan, do you usually say, here are my early adopters, here are the people that are going to...
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Depends on what the change is that we're trying to change. Like I said, but yes, you should consider who are those people that are going to be the advocates for your change.
Mm-hmm.
And how are we going to, what we said in the last couple of sessions, how am I going to measure that change? How am I going to know that I'm making progress towards that change, and have the right people on the bus that are going to help me get there. And if I find out that nobody is really excited about this change,
right,
maybe
they shouldn't do the project.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because will it succeed if there's nobody that's excited about it?
Probably not.
Probably not. So yeah, and again, we always have to kind of look, compare and contrast and look at the positives and the negatives. But going through this analysis will tell you whether or not you think you have a good chance of succeeding or not.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And I think that brings us to the end here today. So any questions? And I see, Matt, you've been chatting a bunch on online.
Yeah. There are any other additional questions, please feel to throw those in now. We can also go to the QR while people kind of queue up any questions they may have. It's a good time to get your phone out as well to scan that.
Here we are.
Right here, click, right? You will be sent the PDU before the end of the week. Thank you for staying to the end, as that is the requirement as well. We really appreciated everyone being here to discuss all of this change theory. It's, I think one of the points that we discussed was it's not one or this or that. It's, as diverse as people are. It's a little bit of all of these, all combined together. So.
Agreed. Well, thank you guys very much. And I guess we have one more coming up.
Yeah, last one of this series, right? So we do have our fourth one from this session here on May 14th. Beforehand, please join Steve and I on April 16th to really kind of talk about time tracking within Project Insight. Where did the time go? Where did it go? And then we will be back on May 21st for another one of our power tutorials to discuss project planning and then execution. We'd love to see you there.
Thanks, Diane.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then season 2 of Project Insights, Where Your Cape to Work podcast will be releasing, sounds like next month as far as that's concerned. Beforehand, please catch up on last season on your favorite streaming platform.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you,
everybody.